Good morning from the National Weather Service in Raleigh. I'm Nick Petro. It's 9:30 a.m. on Friday, April 19th, 2019. Here's our 9:30 webinar regarding the severe weather risk today. Just kind of jumping right into the regional radar, and you can see the activity that we're seeing, the shower and thunderstorm activity that we're seeing moving up from the south. This is kind of what we've been advertising, sort of the first band, if you will, of activity that is occurring now. This should continue in the scattered variety that you see right now throughout the rest of the morning into the early afternoon. So, will there be a risk for severe weather with any of these cells? Absolutely. Things are kind of warming up, and we're keeping our eyes on them. Right now, there's nothing imminent. We're not ready to sort of issue any warnings on anything at the moment, but we're keeping a close eye. Fortunately, it's early in the day, so there hasn't been heating maximized. But really, perhaps the bigger concern is this line you see here moving across the mountains and foothills, and you can see these yellow boxes here across upstate South Carolina, northeast Georgia, and eventually into the western sections of North Carolina. Those are all severe thunderstorm warnings. And essentially, what you see here is kind of what we're expecting to develop as the day progresses. Let me remove the warnings here and stop this and put it in the latest frame. This line that you see here, this line will just gradually propagate eastward, and this is what we're going to be dealing with later today. And you can see how, if I can zoom in, I got to switch to my pointer here. If I zoom in, you can see a lot of these thunderstorms are sort of bowing out, which is a classic damaging straight line wind signature. So that's indeed what I'm assuming is prompting these warnings that you see here that I just overlaid. All right, so that is going to produce our wind threat later today. All right, let me zoom in a little bit closer to current radar across central North Carolina, and you can see that there's really nothing at the moment that is concerning us. In the very near future, there could be some lightning starting to get involved in some of these more enhanced cells. But this is mostly what you see across the southern coastal plain and southern sandhills, US 1, southern half of the US 1 corridor, is mostly just, moderate, in some cases, brief heavy downpours. I think what we're kind of keeping an eye on is this activity that's approaching the triad. That has shown a little bit better organization, perhaps even just a little bit of broad rotation, not necessarily imminent tornado threat, but just, we're starting to see some rotating updrafts is what I'm saying here. So not every rotating updraft creates a tornado. Keep that in mind. Just because a storm's rotating doesn't mean it's producing a tornado. Okay, there's a lot of things that need to come together to get a tornado, but just know that we're kind of watching these, and the triad region is certainly going to be perhaps the area that's first affected as we head through the rest of this morning, and certainly by early afternoon. All right, so let me close this so it doesn't interfere with the slides, and let's go ahead to the slides real quick. The main thing, I'm not going to show every slide because a lot of it's repetitive, but the main thing I wanted to convey here, what has changed is since yesterday, is this moderate risk from the Storm Prediction Center. The Storm Prediction Center generally doesn't issue a whole lot of these moderate risks unless the threat is pretty substantial for severe storms and a couple tornadoes. And it's been at least 3 years. Was it February? When was the last moderate risk? Late February? Yeah, February, like late February 2016 was the last moderate risk we saw here in central North Carolina. Now you can see the color code scale down there at the bottom. What does moderate mean? Moderate means widespread severe storms likely. So, if that's the case, widespread severe storms means just about everybody on this call is going to be dealing with some degree of cleanup and response from wind damage. Okay, so keep that in mind. Widespread. I think what we think here is going to be widespread is just straight line wind damage. So that's the main thing. We think the main threat is widespread straight line wind damage. Okay, with perhaps a handful of tornadoes, and there is the energy is primed, or the atmosphere I should say is primed, that maybe one or two of those brief tornadoes, or one of those tornadoes I should say, could be a little bit longer lasting, a little more intense, and longer track. So So this is definitely not your average severe weather risk that we would see in the springtime. This is kind of on the upper end. And you can see on the scale here, we're certainly the left end of the scale, marginal slight, is low impact to dangerous. We're approaching the deadly side of the scale. Okay, so make sure you are prepared for response, and make sure you're prepared for really to seek shelter first and foremost. And remind your constituents, remind your friends, family, neighbors that make sure they take the time now before the weather gets in here to find their safe sheltering location. All right. So nothing really changed with this slide here. Wind, tornadoes, hail, lightning, flooding, it's all expected. I did bump this up to a slightly higher tornado threat just because of the moderate. But really, again, I want to reiterate that damaging straight line winds is the most likely hazard. Okay. I also want to point out, remember I mentioned just a few moments ago that rotating thunderstorms don't always produce tornadoes. What we oftentimes see with rotating thunderstorms is pretty good size hail. So, the hail threat is pretty elevated as well, just because typically a rotating thunderstorm is such where it can recycle. Well, I don't want to get into science, but it can create large hail. Okay, so keep that in mind too as a hazard associated with rotating thunderstorms. All right. Again, I already sort of reiterated this slide here. It's a moderate risk, widespread severe storms. Don't forget about the flood risk, because heavy downpours, 1 to 2 inches is expected, perhaps locally higher. And it's been kind of wet. The ground's still wet. The rivers and streams are still kind of running high. So we do expect, don't be surprised if there's a couple flash flood warnings that are issued today. All right. The usual places, the urban areas, the poor drainage, the places where the drainage systems get overwhelmed very quickly, that'll be where the flash flood risk is. Okay. So these radar simulations we sent out earlier today. Let me switch screen here. This is again, kind of the similar model, and I just want to kind of take you through this for timing purposes. Let me try to make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. There we go. All right. Hopefully folks will be able to see that a little better. All right. So I already kind of showed you what's happening right now. So again, this is a simulation, this is a model, so it's not going to exactly match what we see actually happening on radar right now. It's just meant to give you a sense of timing. The main point is that as we head through midday, notice like sort of the scattering of showers and thunderstorms across central North Carolina. That's just basically a continuation of that activity that I showed you earlier on radar that's moving up out of South Carolina, and the activity that's basically affecting the triad, western portions of the triad right now. That's going to sort of linger and continue. Now, the longer that sticks around, the better the chance that could be severe, because it's getting warmer throughout as the day progresses. Okay. That will create a severe weather risk in itself, but the real main hazards and timing for severe squall line that we're concerned with is this line that will be coming in from the west. Now, I showed you on the regional radar when we began this webinar, the zoomed out version. We saw that this line that I'm depicting here in the simulations is that line that is currently moving across upstate South Carolina and the North Carolina mountains and foothills. Okay, so that's this line right here. So this timing, it's a model. So give or take an hour either way. Don't take this 4 p.m. as exact. It's meant to give you a sense of roughly when. Give it an hour on either side. Suffice it to say, mid-afternoon, that line will be affecting the triad region, and then as we head to the late afternoon, early evening hours, that'll be coming upon the Triangle region and the Sandhills, the Fayetteville area, so the US 1 corridor. But notice how, remember I showed you earlier in the regional radar, there's some bowing segments that's typical of straight line wind damage. You're seeing that again in here. Okay, so that's why our concern is with the primary mode of damage being straight line winds. However, I will tell you that there could be, in cases, there could be, it's sort of in these embedded within these lines, frequently you'll find spin-ups and tornadoes that occur. Sometimes associated with these bookends of these bow echoes, or just north of the apex of these bow echoes. But the point is that expect widespread wind damage with this squall line, with a few embedded more intense damage associated with potential isolated tornadoes embedded within that. And look how this bows out here, unfortunately, over the triangle. Not to say that's where exactly it's going to happen, but somewhere as it moves across central North Carolina, eastern Piedmont, there's going to be a very intense damaging straight line wind signature. That's early evening. And then, just gradually moving eastward by mid-evening, 9 o'clock, should be crossing the I-95 region and then affecting areas eastern North Carolina as we head towards the late evening hours. All right. So again, just kind of backing it up just one more time. Here's the stuff that we're dealing with right now that could intensify as we head through the rest of the morning hours into midday. So, be ready for a few perhaps scattered, isolated warning type events here as we head through the rest of the morning hours. And then the main event with that squall line, again, mostly producing damaging straight line winds, but potentially having a few embedded tornadoes, mid to late afternoon triad, late afternoon, early evening triangle, I-95 corridor, early to mid evening hours. Okay. And everybody's going to get in on this. That's why Storm Prediction Center upgraded that to moderate, because it's going to be widespread. This whole line is going to produce down trees with localized, more potent wind damage. All right. So I hesitated to whether I should show this or not, but let me just show you real quick here what type of wind gusts are possible with these. Again, this is the same model as what I just showed here. But this is a depiction of potential wind speeds. And I didn't want to fail to mention, we do have a wind advisory up for gusty winds developing this afternoon, not even associated with thunderstorms. It's going to be very, very breezy to perhaps windy at times. And you can see the background image is wind speed. Gusts, not sustained winds, but gusts. And you can see it's going to be, even outside of thunderstorms, it's going to be pretty breezy. You could see a couple down trees isolated just due to the gusty winds outside of thunderstorm activity. But watch what this model's depicting as that squall line moves across. You can see some of these wind gusts in excess of 60 miles per hour. And look how it pretty much, covers all of central North Carolina in that squall line, these gusts of 50, 60, even locally higher wind gusts as it moves across the area. So my point is, and I'm going to close that right away because I don't want to spend too much time on that. My point is this squall line is going to mean business, and I would be prepared for cleanup. Everybody on this call is going to have to deal with some kind of cleanup, and perhaps some more intense damage at times. All right. I think, bear with me for just a second. I think I overheard what folks in the. All right, let's wrap up this webinar here so folks can get back to their business here. Here's the wind advisory I talked about, but essentially let's wrap it up here with this. Here we are right in the midst of the event. So anytime now from now till this evening, there is that risk of significant severe weather. Like I said, these storms are rotating already, so there could be risk for straight line damaging thunderstorm winds, gusts up to 75 miles per hour with that squall line, and a few tornadoes anywhere across central North Carolina. All right. I do want to stress the importance of relaying reports back to us. Okay. So ground truth reports are incredibly helpful. They're necessary for us to be able to go back and sort of calibrate what we're seeing on radar. So anytime you receive damage in your area, anywhere in your area of responsibility, if you can find a way to send that to us, whether it's over NWS chat, whether it's over just picking up the phone and calling us, or whether it's posting it on our social media, NWS chat, or shooting me an email, any way of the numerous ways you have, just try to relay reports to us if you can. All right, so I'm going to wrap up this webinar. And